Shalom, welcome back. We're continuing on with our study of Luke's secret code, the Pythagorean connection in Luke Acts, and this is part 2 in the series. Again, this is not my discovery. You can read this book, Plutarch's Parable, Luke's Gospel, and the Acts of the Apostles by Polyglot. You can find it free at the website on your screen. I'll also put a link in the descriptions. If you want to buy a hard copy of the book, I can give you the link to Amazon also, but it is available for free online. I failed to mention in the last video why exactly we might consider this to be important. Well, there is a connection with the Pythagoreans and the early Jewish Christian sects. So, for instance, Hippolytus mentions that Pythagoras got his doctrine from interacting with Jews in Egypt, and so that's where he got all of his knowledge from. And then Josephus says that the Essenes lived the same kind of life as the people that the Greeks call Pythagoreans. So there's a connection with the Pythagoreans getting their doctrine from Judaism, but yet the Essenes lived just like the Pythagoreans. So that to me kind of indicates that the Jews in Egypt that taught Pythagoras his doctrine would have been Essenes. And in my other videos, I put forth my own understanding, which is that the Essenes and the Jewish Christian groups, that they were all really the same group of people. And so if we want to understand what the earliest believers in Yeshua believed, we should be able to get some insight by studying the Essenes. And if the Essenes are related to the Pythagoreans, then we should be able to get further knowledge by looking at the Pythagoreans. That this may be a source of where we can get some additional understanding about these groups. And we also talked about Philo of Alexandria. He is another, he lived in Alexandria, Egypt, Jewish man, and that he studied and used the doctrines of the Pythagoreans and the Stoics. And he gave us a list of different enigmas we can look at in ancient literature to kind of uncover hidden meaning intended by the author. There is rumor and there is reason to believe that Philo may have actually been a Jewish Christian believer based upon early testimony. Can't really prove it from his own writings, but there is, I guess you could call it a rumor that's been circulating since ancient time that Philo was an ancient Jewish Christian. And so he's given us the key to unlocking any of these texts that may have some hidden truths. And then we're looking at the Gospel of Luke, because there does seem to be some of these enigmas appearing in Luke's Gospel and the book of Acts. So we started off by looking at, in chapter 2 of Luke, at the age of Anna the prophetess. And this in itself connects to this DNA and RNA behavior known as the birth unzipping angle. And so you, as the listener, you may think, well, what would that matter? Because there's no way that ancient Pythagoreans or Essenes could have any understanding or knowledge of the, DNA structure. But there is some evidence that people in the ancient world actually had an advanced understanding of science and physics and that sort of thing, and that some of these ancient myths and legends that we read about do seem to have a basis in them understanding DNA and RNA and that sort of thing. And the sacred numbers and the sacred geometry used by Pythagoreans did indicate that they had a high level of knowledge of the sun, moon, planet, and stars. We're going to get into that as we go along. But needless to say, in the ancient world, there was advanced knowledge. We're not really sure how the people of the ancient world had this advanced knowledge, but there is evidence that it was there. So we can't completely discount this, what you might call a coincidence with this birth unzipping angle being hidden within the Gospel of Luke. So, probably you might think, if you were the investigator and you're in Luke chapter 2 and you uncover this thing with Anna's age, you may say, well, let's turn back to chapter 1 and see if there's anything we might have missed. So if we go back to chapter 1, there's 5 numbers listed in the chapter. And so the verses where they are contained are on your screen. But basically it gives us 5 numbers: 5, 6, 6, 3, and 8. So if we were going to manipulate these numbers and see if we can uncover any kind of like a hidden code or a hidden message, probably one of the first things you may attempt is to multiply all of these numbers by each other. And we end up with this number, 4,320. Well, 432 is actually a sacred number, because if you divide 4320 by 2, you get the diameter of the moon. If you multiply 432,000 by 2, you get the diameter of the sun. And if you square 432, you get the speed of light. So what is the connection between these 3 numbers? What is 432? What is the secret code or the secret message that would be revealed with that number? And the connection itself is that it connects to light in 3 different ways. So you could say that 432 is a symbol of light. So, interestingly enough, Luke, the name Luke actually means light. And for instance, this goddess Lux was a goddess of light in ancient mythology. So how would that connect with the Nazareans? Well, the Nazareans refer to themselves as the children of light. So you've got this Gospel of Light, or the Gospel of Luke, with the hidden number for light in the text of the first chapter, and the Nazareans refer to themselves as children of light. Now, the numbers that Luke threw out right off the bat lead to and support the foundation that Luke hid the truth in coded numbers and words and in parables, and anyone who seeks to know the truth must be willing to look for it by decoding Luke's puzzle clues. So studied in light of this realization, Luke's opening paragraph in both of his works, Luke and Acts, provide far more information than appears on the surface. So if we look at Luke chapter 1, the first 4 verses, it says, "Since many have undertaken to set down an orderly account of the events that have been fulfilled among us, just as they were handed on to us by those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word." Now notice that Luke is telling you in the opening verses that he got his testimony, he's got his information directly from the eyewitnesses. It's almost like this fact is being stressed here in the introduction. So this would not have been, Luke is not claiming to get testimonies from people like Paul, who never met Yeshua. He's saying he got these came straight from eyewitnesses. He said that I too have decided, after investigating everything carefully from the very first, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the truth concerning the things about which you have been instructed. So first of all, he's mentioning that he got this from eyewitnesses, and then he speaks to this person Theophilus. Now, there were people who were actually named Theophilus in ancient Judea. One of the high priests was named Theophilus, and Josephus' father was actually called Theophilus. So it can be a name, but the meaning of the name, Theo, is like theology. It's speaking about religious belief, and Philos is lover. So Theophilus means lover of theology or lover of religion. So this could itself be directed to you and I. Anyone who is a lover of religion Luke is writing this gospel for us so that we may know the truth. Now, generally, Luke is thought to be a Pauline believer. So, given my personal understanding of Paul, you wouldn't think that you would get a lot of truth from Luke, and many of the passages in Luke's gospel seem to indicate that he had more of a Pauline view, at least on the surface. And then if we turn to the book of Acts, again at the introduction, it says, in the first book, Theophilus, so then again you have this lover of religion, I wrote about all that Yeshua did and taught from the beginning until the day when he was taken up to heaven, after giving instructions through his Holy Spirit to the apostles whom he had chosen. So in the same way that the Gospel of Luke had emphasized eyewitnesses, again you see the same thing in Acts. He's emphasizing the apostles to whom Yeshua had chosen. Now keep in mind, again, Paul is not one of those which Yeshua had chosen. The ones that he had chosen are listed in the Gospels specifically. So perhaps this is an indication that there's more to the Gospel of Luke than what lies on the surface. And whereas on the surface it may look like Luke was a Pauline believer, we're going to explore this a little deeper and see if maybe he was actually a Jamesian Christian writing in code to people to preserve the truth, because he saw what was happening with the Pauline mission of blood atonement. So we'll speak about the Synoptic Gospels for just a moment. The earliest gospel is pretty much universally believed to have been Mark, and that Mark was probably written by a Roman Pauline Christian. The reason that we believe this is that the tradition is that Mark actually wrote his gospel in Rome. A lot of the text of the Gospel of Mark seems to be directed toward apologetics, to make Yeshua seem like he's friendly to the Romans. So if Mark was a early Christian living in Rome about the time of the destruction of Jerusalem, he would have been trying to kind of tone down any kind of anti-Roman thoughts or statements that were made by Yeshua. And so Mark is very apologetic toward a Roman standpoint. Now there's also another early source which we don't have any longer, but scholars regard it as the Q source. And so it's a sayings gospel. And then from this Q source, there was a person who took both of these sources and combined them and made what we call the Gospel of Matthew. Now, Matthew is a more Jamesian Christian version of Mark. So whereas Mark is almost like disparaging toward the family of Yeshua and Yeshua's brothers, Matthew goes out of his way to kind of tone down the anti-Jamesian rhetoric of Mark. And so this is why Matthew is probably written by a Jamesian Christian, possibly in Pella, because a lot of times there are several passages in Mark that seem to indicate that it was written on the other side of the Jordan, opposite from Jerusalem. So that is right there in the area of Pella, just south of Damascus. And then also these two gospels, or these two sources, Mark and Q, were used by Luke. And it's generally believed that Luke was written by a Pauline Christian in Asia Minor. So Luke seems to be kind of written toward more of a Pauline slant, but he does seem to be more friendly toward the Jewish Christian believers than Mark was, almost like he was trying to work to bring unity to these two opposing groups. So if this is true, what we're looking at now, and that maybe Luke was actually written by an Essene using Philo's enigmas to hide a secret message or a something that he wanted for only the initiated, then it would explain how the Matthew version and the Luke version are so similar. Because the one thing wrong with this theory about Matthew being written independently in Pella and then Luke being written independently in Asia Minor is, how are they so similar? It's obvious that either Luke had a knowledge of the Gospel of Matthew when he wrote Luke, or Matthew had a knowledge of Luke when he wrote Matthew. Otherwise, they wouldn't be as similar as they are. So if this Pythagorean theory ends up showing evidence that there's a secret message in Luke that is more in line with the Jamesian version, then this could mean that Luke was not actually written by a Pauline Christian in Asia Minor, but may actually have been written by a Jamesian Christian in Alexandria, Egypt, and coded in Essene enigmas using Matthew for a source. So this could be some very exciting phenomenon that we'll uncover, and so we'll look at this and see if it'll give us any kind of insight into what Luke was thinking and what was on his mind when he was writing his book. So I thank you for listening. We'll get into this a little bit deeper in part 3. I pray that this is a blessing for you, and I pray that it's piqued your curiosity a little bit, and so we will continue on in part 3. Shalom.